How can you master time? How can you create more time in your life for what matters for you? This is what this video is all about, and I will break it down in some key principles. The first principle is mindset, and there are two types of mindset. First mindset is ownership versus victim mindset. If you believe that the way you spend your time is due to other people or circumstances or situations and it's not your responsibility, then you're in a victim mindset. On the other hand, if you acknowledge and you realize that the way you're spending your time right now, watching this video for instance, is due to a current choice or past decision you've made, then you have an ownership mindset. And the reason it's fundamental to switch from victim to ownership mindset is because you can only change your relationship with time if you take ownership and responsibility for how you're spending your time. The second type of mindset is abundance versus scarcity. If you're constantly saying, I don't have enough time, I'm too busy, I'm not going to be able to fit it in, then you have a scarcity perspective when it comes to time. And the issue with this is the more you repeat it to yourself over and over again, I don't have enough time, I'm not going to make it work, the more you will start to believe that you really don't have the time. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Instead, you want to have an abundance mindset. This is where you think you have all the time in the world and you can always fit in another conversation and you are free and available to do certain things, and seeing time as abundant and not as a restricted resources. So this was the first principle, mindset, ownership and abundance. Remember, focus on ownership and abundance. The second principle is to master your thoughts and your emotions. Why is this so important? Because if you don't master your emotions, you'd be surprised how much time you waste worrying, feeling guilty, being annoyed, being frustrated, being angry. Do you realize how all of these thoughts monopolize so much of your time? How you're less effective because you're constantly rethinking about things, how you're not present as much. So once you learn to master the way you think and you master your emotions, then you will be able to actually have more space and time because you're not constantly thinking about stuff or constantly thinking about negative things or still feeling all of these emotions that take up so much space. The third principle is perfectionism and hyperachiever. If you're somewhat of a perfectionist or you're a hyperachiever, they're a bit different, but they are very similar in many ways. This will have obviously an impact on how you manage your time, because as a perfectionist, even hyperachiever, you want to deliver outstanding results of high quality. Now that's fantastic and definitely aim for great quality, but you might notice that that extra 1% takes up a bunch of hours and really doesn't make that much of a difference. So learn to embrace excellent, but not perfect. Doing a great job, but not that extra 0.1% and changing all the colors and fonts and making it all absolutely amazing and perfect, because that's where you waste a lot of time. And you can either use boundaries or deadlines or different ways to force you to do the best job you can in a given amount of time and not waste such a precious resource on something that really doesn't make such a difference. The fourth principle is boundaries and Parkinson Law. People do not manage their time because they're not clear on what their boundaries are. This happened a lot with people working from home. Suddenly they were working to 7 or 8 p.m. because they didn't set a boundary. It was more systematic in the office, and then at home suddenly it would just step over their private life, their personal time, their relationships. But if you have boundaries in place, if you decide how long you want to spend on a certain task, then you are more likely to stick to it, and this will enable you to actually have more time for the other stuff in your life. And Parkinson Law is an interesting one where you can sort of trick yourself to get more done in a shorter amount of time. It's what I was talking about with perfectionism. This is when you set yourself 2 hours to do something and you get it done in those 2 hours. Essentially, the work filled in the allotted time you've dedicated to it. Very, very powerful. I use it all the time, and you'd be surprised how many things you can achieve or do when you just have that amount of time to do them. The fifth tool is stop procrastinating. Procrastination comes from many different things, from being unclear about what you want to do to lots of fear or negative emotions, maybe fear of rejection or fear of failure. So acknowledge, realize that those are the emotions driving the procrastination and step away from it. The easiest way to stop procrastinating is, and you've heard this before, breaking it down into small blocks and just starting. Because once you start, you gain momentum. And be sure that you're 100% clear on what you want to do. If you lack clarity, probably you'll start to procrastinate. And if this isn't enough and this doesn't work for you, then get an accountability partner. Find someone and say, look, if I haven't done this by the end of the week, I'll pay you X. Force yourself. Find ways where you have no longer any alternative and you can't procrastinate anymore. And if that doesn't work with a coach or a therapist to see what other internal blockages are getting in the way, because sometimes there's some really deep-rooted things that are supporting that procrastination and not supporting you to get the results you want in your life. The sixth tip is find balance. Be clear on what balance looks like for you, because crafting more time, we all know we have 24 hours in a day. It's not really crafting more time. It's crafting more time for you to have that balance, for you to spend on certain hobbies, on certain people, on things that matter for you. So define what that balance ideally would look like. See where you're at now. Look at the gap and start to think, what can you do? What can you change? What boundaries can you put in place? What different tools and aspects can you use to reach this ideal balance? And the closer you get to it, the better. So these were some of the fundamental principles that I believe can really support you to craft more time in your life, and looking at how you can shift your mindset, master your thoughts and emotions, overcome perfectionism and hyperachiever, have clear boundaries in place and use Parkinson Law, stop procrastinating, and find and define that ideal balance for you. I cover each of these topics a lot more in depth, one per episode, on my podcast, The Focus Bee Show, that you can find on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on all of these channels. And I am covering them in my season 4 called Tea and Pie, How to Master Time, Energy, Attention to get greater profit, impact, and expertise in your business. So this was a rough overview, and it's a lot more in depth in my podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. Wishing you a wonderful day, and hope that you start to implement these tools so you can have the time, craft the time, and master your relationship with time.